Hello and welcome to Dan's Model Works. Today we're going to be looking at the Sexton Mark II 25-pounder self-propelled gun mount by Dragon. This is a 1/35 scale kit. It does not come with any figures in it, but we are talking about a very full box of plastic. Now let's just take a look around this extremely colorful box. Now I will point out one thing. For some strange reason, the glue that they used to put my box together completely let go as soon as I took the plastic off the outside of it, but the contents were just fine. On the side we have some three-sided views, full color. The other side we have some of the features of the kit, saying all the interior is fully detailed, as well it should be, being an open top vehicle. And then if we look at the back, we have more self-congratulations going on here, showing all the features that come with the kit. Of course, this is all computer rendered, but basically these are probably files that they used when they cut the tooling. And if we look down here, it comes with one-piece vinyl tracks. I know a lot of people don't like that. I'm kind of neutral on it. I've built both. Well, I've built a lot with vinyl tracks and a couple with multi-piece tracks, and we'll take a good look at those inside. You do have options if you don't want to use those ones. Lots of companies put out replacement tracks for Sherman tanks and that, so they will fit this because the running gear is the same. For those of you who are not familiar with the Sexton, it solved a serious problem for the British during the Second World War. The British Army had an excellent artillery piece in the form of the 25-pounder gun, but it was a towed weapon. As they became involved in the war in North Africa, they felt they needed a self-propelled version. The first attempt was known as a Bishop. This consisted of the 25-pounder mounted in a large box on the top of a Valentine tank hull. Those familiar with British tank design from World War II will realize this was probably not a recipe for success. The Bishop suffered from poor reliability, mobility, and the 25-pounder could not elevate to its full potential, thus reducing its range. The British Army then began using the M7 Priest. This was an American design which consisted of the 105mm howitzer, mounted on first M3 chassis and then later an M4 Sherman chassis. Now, these tanks may have had survivability issues, but most will agree they were extremely reliable and agile. The M7 gave the British Army a good self-propelled gun, but it created a new headache, as the 105mm howitzer was not a standard British weapon and needed a dedicated logistical supply. The Americans were asked to investigate fitting a 25-pounder to the Priest, and some design work was carried out, but it was made clear that U.S. arms factories would not be used to build weapons not used by the U.S. Meanwhile, in Canada, tanks based on the M3 Grant, the Ram, and later the M4 Sherman, known as the Grizzly, had been in production. It had been decided that the U.S. could produce sufficient Shermans for themselves and their allies. The decision was taken to use the chassis from the Grizzly to build a self-propelled gun using the 25-pounder. This was a success and was known as the Sexton. The Mark I used a derivative of the M3 hull, while the Mark II used the M4 hull. So why don't we take a look at the box? So let's see what we've got in the box. Here's the bag with the tracks in them. Now, there is another version of this kit according to ScaleMates, and it comes with what are known as the Canadian dry pin tracks. And all that is a slightly different track design, which didn't require quite as much lubrication or maintenance. So we've got the bag with the tracks. We've got a bag with 2 sprues in it here. This bag has another 1, 2, 3, 4 sprues in it. 2 sprues in this bag. And here we have what appears to be the lower hull. a decal sheet, a very small bag containing some photo etch parts, instructions, and here we have one more bag containing 2 more sprues. Certainly lots of sprues in this kit. We'll take a good look at them all in a minute. Here we have the decal sheet, and the multicolor portions certainly look like they're in register. I don't see any misalignments or anything like that. They were printed by Cartograph in Italy. Very nice decal sheet. And here are the instructions. And we have the sprue maps. Now everything that is in blue indicates parts that will not be used. So you're certainly going to have a lot of parts for the spares bin. And up here we have color callouts, and they're quoting Mr. Color, but you can use any paint you want actually. And of course we start off with the wheels and the suspension, and the lower hull. Anyone who's built any armor kit that's based on a Sherman will certainly be familiar with these parts. Assembly continues on the interior, and it does appear to be a complete interior. Quite a few steps. And of course we have those confounded one-piece vinyl tracks. And on the back we have the markings. So we have, let's see, here we have a unit from Normandy, and this one looks like Germany, an identified unit in Northwest Europe, and this one is another unit in Northwestern Europe in 1944. And unidentified unit, Northwest Europe, 1945. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different versions you can build. So you certainly do have some options. So let's start looking at the parts, and we'll start off by looking at the tracks. And these are extremely well detailed. It's not like you can say there's nothing on the backside. They have all the various rivets and bolts and things that go into making these up. Now, if you really objected to using these, you can certainly, any aftermarket Sherman style tracks could be used on this, because of course it's all the same running gear. But it looks like it'll go together without too many problems. I'll probably end up using these because I'm lazy. Before getting into the plastic parts, we have the small photo etch sheet. It's really only 6 parts on here. But then again, when I started building armor, you didn't get any photo etch at all. But these certainly look nicely done. And here's the first of the plastic pieces, or sprues. There's only one part on this sprue, and it's the lower hull. And there's actually weld bead running along here. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. And lots of nicely molded bolt heads as well. This part certainly is nice. I apologize if I misidentify any of the parts. I'm looking at these on the fly at the same time I'm showing them to you folks. We've got this sprue here, and you can see here is the nose. And the transmission's behind there. It looks like the back end. These arches of bolts, they go on there. Very, very nice detail on everything. This appears to be part of the transmission, because of course being open, you're going to see pretty much the entire interior. Down here it looks like we've got the guards for the various lights and things. Tail lights down here. I'm not seeing any sprue on this sheet. Oh, there's the drive shaft right there. Moving on, we have many of the parts for the upper hull. There's the sides. This appears to be the floor of the interior. Looks like the mud guards for the back end, maybe the front end. This looks like the engine cover, some of the ventilation for the engine. This here, get my finger out of the light, appears to be the radio. Let's kind of go close up on this one here. Lots of nice detail on that radio. This sprue has the vertical volute suspension members. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so we must have some somewhere else. And of course some of the road wheels. Oh, here's another sprue with more of those parts. Anybody who's built an American tank based on either the Grant or the Sherman will be familiar with all these parts. And this big sprue here, and there's even more suspension parts. But then as we saw in the instructions, a lot of these we're not going to use, so you're certainly going to have a lot of parts for your spare bin. And here we have some of the drive wheels and some of the arms for the wheels. Like I said, a lot of parts are duplicated because this kit, obviously, parts of this can be used for other tanks and armor using the same chassis. It wouldn't surprise me if Dragon, some of these sprues are used in other kits. As you can see, a lot of these parts we saw in the last sprue, everything is very, very nicely molded though. Not seeing any flash. I'm not seeing any awkwardly located ejector pin marks. I mean, if we look on the back side of these wheels, you can see some of it, but you're not going to see that once it's put together. And here we have another nose. And we have the bolts that hold them together. So with a little bit of research, you could probably do several different variations. Basically, there was a Mark I and a Mark II of the Sexton. And the only difference was one was based on the M3 Grant and Lee, and the other one was based on the Sherman tank. This looks like the back end, the engine cover, the vertical part of it. This looks like it's the gun barrel. Sorry, the gun barrel is not a turned metal part in this kit. I would imagine there's probably some aftermarket items you could use to substitute if that was important to you. This sprue appears to have a lot of parts for the actual gun mounting. You can see it looks like probably elevating mechanisms and such. Now, all these little ball-like items here, they will have to be cut off when the parts come off of the sprue. And this may be a bit of an annoyance, but by putting these on, they can usually ensure that the mold gets completely filled with styrene. I would rather have a part that's fully molded and crisp and have to cut off a couple of these little knobs than have parts that aren't exactly as we know them as being short shots. This next sprue here, it's got some jerry cans on it. It looks like more parts of the gun mounting here. And this device here, this is actually a spool for putting field wire on. You can see right here this spool of field wire will go in between those. It certainly is a nice touch. And then finally we have this sprue. And this appears to have a lot of the components for the superstructure and the gun mounting and such. Certainly is an awful lot of parts in this kit, although quite a few of them won't be used, as different versions are buildable from variations of this kit. There are no clear parts, which is pretty much the norm for armor kits, and I don't even think there would have been any periscopes on the Sexton anyway. Overall, I'm really happy with the way these parts are molded. Some people, like I said, might have an issue with the little knobs that are molded on, but they're easily clipped off. And there you have Dragon's Sexton Mark II 25-pounder self-propelled gun. Certainly an impressive kit. Now, I haven't taken out a 1/35 scale ruler to make sure that this is the right length or width or whatever. It certainly looks like it's going to build up to be accurate. Some may consider the inclusion of vinyl tracks to be a disadvantage, but You know what, folks? If you really have to have multi-piece tracks, they are available on the aftermarket for various versions of Shermans, so they will fit this. But really, those tracks have got to be some of the nicest one-piece tracks I've ever seen molded. I'm probably going to use them. So, until next time, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and keep on modeling.